I'm Nate. Jake is somewhere. Oh, he's in the audience. We're brothers. And we're going to talk about cooperative ownership and organizing and the effect that has on communities. And I'm going to begin with a story about a lamp. And like many great stories, this one begins in Egypt, where Jake used to be a professor of political science. And we took a family trip out to visit him. And he assured us before we arrived that we were going to want to leave Egypt with an Egyptian lamp. And to that end, he had met and befriended a lamp guy at a market in Cairo. And he was not wrong. We all went home somehow with lamps. And I got very carried away and bought 3. I got like a floor lamp, a desk lamp, and a ceiling lamp that you have to like wire in. Right now, at the time, I was living in this building here. That was my kitchen window. Student halls, right? It was in Edinburgh in Scotland, which of course is not all that far from New Lanark, which is where it was an early planned industrial community where Robert Owen developed many of his ideas about utopian and labor organizing that he would bring to places like New Harmony. It was 24 flats and apartments in 2 buildings, 106 students living there. And if you know anything about student halls, certainly student halls in the UK, you kind of expect blank, sterile, soulless, empty, bleak spaces, right? Sometimes they have random accents of bright color to give it the facade of friendliness. But always really uncomfortable, very heavy furniture. I think that's to deter you from stealing it, not that anyone would want to steal that furniture. This was a kitchen downstairs from me, and I love the setting with the limes and the wine. It's just, I don't know what's going on there. Spaces that are designed to prevent you from properly inhabiting them, right? You have no material control. You can't paint the walls. You can't do anything. This was my cousin's kitchen, and during his master's year in St. Andrews. This is the shared kitchen, dining, living space. How are the 5 residents of this flat supposed to share a meal together in a nice, sociable way? I mean, they're not. They're not supposed to. It's designed against that kind of activity. They're also designed to erase, or even better, prevent any history, any marks left by past, present, or future residents, right? Everything is scrubbed clean. Whenever you move in, this is what it looks like. They're places to leave more than places to be. Now, part of my inspiration for wanting one of these lamps was because in my flat, we had all these horrible fluorescent lights that had this green hint. This is perhaps a bit exaggerated. It wasn't quite this green, but it was pretty bad. Now, this kind of thing, this bleakness, this lighting, this design without care for the human inhabitants is not exclusive to student housing. It is endemic to much rental accommodation, especially new rental accommodation, and often socially rented accommodation. Now, you might say, wait a minute, Nathan, how, if you were living in student halls, might you expect to be able to change your ceiling light fitting if your tenancy agreement, your lease agreement, prevents you from making any alterations to the design, to the decoration, without the permission of the landlord? And the landlord is never going to give permission to change the wiring of the building. Well, I lived in the Edinburgh Student Housing Cooperative. So what is a cooperative? So cooperatives and cooperative organizing, a cooperative looks like this typically. A group of people who've come together to meet some shared economic, social, or cultural need or aspiration through a commonly owned and democratically controlled entity. Now, not all co-ops have to be formal legal things, right? Most volunteer groups are run cooperatively. People come together and on a more or less equal basis, or we might hope, work together to serve some need, for example, in the community. Many, like worker cooperatives or housing cooperatives, will be more formal legal entities. In the United States, they often take the form of a limited liability company. And importantly, the only people, unlike a publicly traded company, the only people who hold the shares of a cooperative are the members, the people closest to it. They are the people who benefit from the cooperative's activities. There are more or less three sort of primary modes of cooperatives. There are more, and there are hybrids of these, but you often have consumer cooperatives, worker cooperatives, and housing cooperatives. So consumer cooperatives, the members, the owners, or the patrons. So you might think of REI or Scottmid, which is a grocery chain in the UK. Worker cooperatives include places like Suma. I believe it's the UK's largest worker cooperative. It has more than 100 members. And they're a really fascinating place. If we have time, we can get into it. But for example, they pay all their employees the same, whether they started yesterday or 10 years ago. And they have a workforce that is really very, very, very happy to work there. Very high retention rates. Design Anarchy Co-op is Jacob's new architectural design worker cooperative. So there are lots of different kinds at different scales of worker cooperatives. The idea being that the workers, the people who put in the time and effort, should be the ones to benefit from their labor. And in housing, it's the residents who own the cooperative. Redwood Housing Cooperative is one of 4 housing cooperatives. If you've ever been to London, right on the Thames, there's that big OXO Tower, an old historic building. That and the many acres around it are all owned by a cooperative group, and Redwood Housing Cooperative is one of the cooperatives there. Berkeley has a long history of student housing cooperatives back to the 1930s, after the Great Depression. I'm just going to get some water. Oh, sorry. So there's many different kinds of cooperatives. When it comes to housing, right, a big part of it is getting rid of landlords, removing landlords from the equation. Landlords get between you and your housing. They tell you what to do. They charge you a lot of rent. They extract money from you, and that's not what we want. That's not what I want. I don't know about you. This is Plowshare, a really beautiful housing cooperative in Edinburgh. It's an 8-bedroom house that's shared among more or less sort of young professionals typically. The way that it works is that there's the legal entity, Plowshare Housing Cooperative. That owns the property, 16 West Hall Gardens, that beautiful house right there. The residents who live in the property are the shareholders of the cooperative. So they live in the property, they all collectively own it. They don't individually own it. They don't have individual equity in it. They don't get to financially benefit from it. And hopefully, they don't financially benefit, for example, from a sale of the property. That's not what we want. We want this to live in perpetuity to serve as good housing for people. We want to privilege the use value of this building, not the financial value. In the case of the student housing co-op, student housing is outrageously expensive everywhere you go. In Edinburgh, it's a particularly bad problem. These are figures from 2018, but as you can see, the Edinburgh Student Housing Cooperative, we charged £320 then. When we first started, we were charging £305, right? 8 years later, we were charging £338. In 8 years, what do you think private student halls increased, or private rentals on the market? How much has property value or rental costs increased in a city like Indianapolis in 8 years? Probably a lot more than $33 per month, say. And as you can see, compared to the universities, compared to the private student halls, certainly compared to renting a private flat, for example, far and away the cheapest housing in the city, and that has only become more prominent because our costs have grown very, very, very slowly. Their costs have grown very, very, very quickly. This is just a breakdown of the costs. I'm going to skip it because we're going to get back to the lamps. So when I brought home these lamps, there's 2 of them. Nope, there's the other one. There's all 3. I needed to find out how to wire them. I hadn't ever done that before. But fortunately, someone in the co-op had already done this. He had changed out his light because his light also was terrible, obviously. So we sat down. He told me what I needed to get. I went and got it. We sat down together. He showed me how to do it. We worked through it, and it was done. And it was really very easy, surprisingly easy for this thing that we often have to contract out. We hire someone to come and do it, pay them a lot of money to do this thing that actually I think most people could probably readily do. It was a piece of cake. So they were all wired. I installed the ceiling light. It was super cool. The landscape of our flat completely changed. It transformed our space. My flatmate, Lucy, saw my light and was like, this is amazing. I would love to do this in my room. So I worked with her. I showed her how to do it. She did it. And I also helped her. She found some scrap pieces of wood, some leftover brackets. She really wanted to put some shelves up in her room. She put up these shelves. She installed her new light. And she said to me, I think that before starting, I didn't know that I could do it. I was just, she's Belgian, so some of her English is a little bit broken. I was just, oh my God, I would have to ask everybody. And then, now that I have done it, I'm just like, whoa, so proud. So I'm I'm happy. And I like, it's a skill. It's very interesting because it's a skill that it's something you don't really do, using your hands and building your stuff. And then when you do it, you'll feel very proud of yourself. So I'm quite happy, yeah. So then Lucy showed our flatmates how to change their lights, and they went and changed the kitchen light, and they changed the hallway lights, and improved our quality of living dramatically. And Jasper, one of my flatmates, said, I think we've already made this place better for the next generation of residents, We've contributed something good with this. So this wasn't just about what's happening for us. This is happening for everyone who will live in this space going forwards. These and related feelings about the co-op, they abound in that space. When we moved in to this flat 16, we immediately stripped that horrible wood chip wallpaper that had glossy paint. It was everywhere because glossy paint is really easy to clean, right? Strip away the history. Well, we got rid of that. We found some William Morris wallpaper. If you're familiar with William Morris, you'll know that he's quite a wonderful figure in the British arts and crafts movement. We found some complementary paint colors. We repainted the kitchen. We bought a table with a big leaf that we could seat a whole big group of people around and have a nice meal. We bought more comfortable furniture. Other people transformed their rooms. Hannah wanted to sleep in a hammock. She wanted a wood floor. We had big tables that people could sit around. That was Christmas one year for people who couldn't go back to their home country. Some people lugged upright pianos that they found up 3 flights of stairs to share music with their dad who was visiting. We built a double-decker bike storage space over what was car parking that nobody used. In a city like Edinburgh, it's very compact. There's amazing public transit. You walk everywhere. I pretty much walk everywhere in Edinburgh. Everyone has a bike. All we had was car parking spaces. We didn't need car parking spaces, so we designed and built a green roof bike shelter that could hold, I don't know, maybe 70 bikes or something, and planted it with native species, native wildflowers, and it is absolutely stunning. And now the neighbors across the way get to look at that instead of a car park. We transformed the parking lot in the basement of the property into a habitable communal space. So we worked with some architects who helped guide us through a process rather than do it for us. We didn't contract out the work. We couldn't afford contracting out the work. We did 90% of the work ourselves. We put to use an old high school gymnasium floor as our flooring, subfloor heating, air source heat pump. And now we have this amazing space that we can be in warmly. It's open to the community. We have community open events. We have jam sessions and poetry readings, and that's where we have our general meetings where we organize ourselves. And that would never have happened in a student halls, quite frankly. And we're doing all this in spaces that are designed for something else, right? This was my flat. Look how awful that design is. Like, that is not designed for human habitation. That is designed to squeeze as many people into a space as you can get away with, to extract as much rent as you possibly can. So we're doing that under the great constraints of the environment that was built for us. Imagine the kinds of spaces that we might live in if we designed those spaces collectively together. This is not exclusive to students, right? So LILAC, the Low Impact Living Affordable Community, quite a tortured acronym. It's 20 homes that were built in a sustainable way, in large part by the residents in Leeds. They moved in May, conceived the idea in 2006, moved in May of 2013. This is cooperatively owned and run. Lots of green space, mixed families, young people, older people. Those are the kinds of housing that I'm quite interested in today. Less siloed student housing or old folks' homes. I think we need to live in communities where people live together from all different backgrounds. West Whitleburn Housing Cooperative is a remarkable story. This is a former council estate, all these big high-rises and some of these lower apartment buildings near them. In the 1980s, the residents here were very displeased with the way the council was running their housing, right? Which is not an uncommon story in the UK, or anywhere, really, where someone else is running your housing. So what they did is they got together, a small group of people, researched, coordinated, organized their community, and together, this community of people bought out the council and created the West Whitleburn Housing Cooperative. Since then, they have completely refurbished their buildings. They have built hundreds of new homes on site. They still serve council lists, still social housing. They built a district heating plant to serve the needs because they themselves recognized that they experienced fuel and energy poverty. So they wanted to provide for themselves a need that they had. So they provided their own energy needs on site. And they still have affordable housing because, of course, the profit is taken out of it, but also with council housing, it's not just about profit. Here it's about who's telling you what to do in your housing, the dignity of having your own choices and your own say in your housing. They manage for themselves 644 properties. It's a huge endeavor. It's a remarkable place. The conclusion of all this, of course, is that people know what they need and what they aspire to in their own housing. And by extension, I think we can say their own lives. You know what you need, and you know what you want from your life and from your housing. And I think that when people have shared power over the places they inhabit, they then transform the social and material worlds in which they live to meet those needs and their aspirations. By adding shelves in our kitchens, in the student co-op, we were able to expand the kinds of foods we could make. By having bigger tables, we could have more people over. We could gather together around. We could play music together in ways we couldn't before. It transformed our transportation possibilities, right? Building a bike shelter rather than having car parking for the 4 of us who had cars. The ability to change the lights physically changed our experience every day of what was entering our eyes, and it provided us with new opportunities to learn and to teach and to share ways of transforming your own space, demystifying previously mystified professions. That's really all I wanted to mention right now. Jacob might have a few things to say, but really I wanted to leave the remainder of the time. We've got about 10 minutes left for questions. There's a lot that I didn't get into. There's a lot that could be shared, but I feel like a lot of that might come from your questions. Did you want to say something, Jake?
Yeah. Actually, you can turn the lights on. That'd be great, actually, if we turn the lights on. So Nathan got to do the polished, optimistic part. I'm going to do the rambling, angry part, chastising part. Because Jim said if I didn't talk, I had to pay for housing here. So basically, it's true. The feedback we often get about this is that well, how are you going to inspire people to do this? This is something for students or people who have ideas. And what I want to assure you is that it's not that people need invigorated. The people who need to change to make this a reality are the people in this room. People with ideas, people with means, people who think they know what's good for a community. You are the biggest obstacle to cooperative housing, to a truly democratic society. And that's because we have lost touch with what democracy means. And if we look over at Terre Haute, Eugene V. Debs, he's the closest I've found to a true homegrown Democrat. And he had some quote, I'll paraphrase it here. It's essentially, I would not lead you to a promised land, because if I could, someone would surely lead you right back out. Right? The idea of democracy is based on one fundamental idea of equality, and that is that we are all equally bad at understanding our own capacity for leadership. We are all very bad at that. This is an ancient definition of democracy, somehow got lost. But our equality is not inability, it's an inability. And you are all greatly incapable of understanding what it is you're bringing to the table. And our ideas often get in the way of other people's ideas. I have a PhD in political science. I don't know what the fuck to tell people to do for constitutions. I have a degree in architecture. I don't know a goddamn thing about what you want in your house. I can help facilitate those things, but I need to step out of the way. And many people here are accomplished, they're planners, they're architects, they're artists. Bring those ideas and then chill out, all right? Back off a little bit. Let people have some ideas, and that's the thing that is going to make this kind of idea of living a reality. It's stepping back from your own idea or letting it live in a milieu with other people's ideas. So that's the rambling chastising that I'll do, and then I'll back off after that. But I've been yeah.
Thanks.
So
Jake.
questions.
Well, just because you reminded me of the theme, of course, of this symposium, which is utopias, right? I think very often, certainly historically, we've defined utopias as a noun, as a destination, right? But utopia is a verb. It's a striving for something, and I think really it has to be the striving for something shared, right? It's not me defining for you. It's me sharing with you what I want and what I need, and you sharing with me those things, and us coming to a common understanding and moving forward together. And it will always be different and always be changing, right? It is, in the student housing co-op, the people who live there now run it differently from how we ran it when I lived there. And they will continue to run it differently as the people's experiences are different. And that's great. There's no best practice. That's a scam on society. Everything depends on who's there, the context. We need to think of utopias as a verb, not a noun.